Hello, my friend, and welcome to the Sales Podcast. I'm Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer, your host. And when you hear this music, you know it's interview time. I'm working on a review right now of the Ask book by Ryan Levesque. It has taken me a little longer to get to that, so I apologize for a little bit of a delay. But I'm going through it. I'm actually applying it and working on quite a few other things. But I will get this routine down. But today, you're in for a treat with Mr. Poirier. He is a Canadian individual. You'll hear it when he says about. But a cool dude. He reached out to me recently and got to know each other. I was on his podcast. That's going live here very soon as well. But the guy is a speaker, and he's done this for many years. And we get into detail how he began, how he currently gets speaking gigs, how does he get paid for them. So I think you will appreciate the information that he shares. And so get ready to take some notes. Also, if you've not been to the website for a little while, please check out thesaleswhisperer.com. Got some new private training options available. Soon you will see the launch of my Inner Circle. I'm also working on a high-level mastermind to do. I'll be doing that in late March in San Diego. That's going to be around the time of Infusionsoft's SuccessCon. And actually, it's not Infusionsoft's anymore because they stopped doing Icon. But it is an Infusionsoft-centered conference. So if you have been interested in attending some type of mastermind with me, working a little more closely, still in a group setting, so it's a little more affordable, but getting a little more private help in that regard, stay tuned for the Inner Circle. And so I'll be retooling the Make Every Sale program to be an on-demand course. So you may want to jump in now and get the Make Every Sale course. And I'm going to be grandfathering in current members into the Inner Circle. So there's a lot of benefit for taking action now. All right. But without further ado, let's bring on our guest. Poirier, all the way from Canada. Welcome to the Sales Podcast, man. How the heck are you?
I am doing fantastic, Wes. Excited to be here.
So you've got some signature talk, timeless secrets of influential leaders. What the heck? How'd you come up with that? And who died and made you king so you know what an influential leader is anyway, huh?
I guess the first part to the question is that it's sort of, I'll say that I came up with it, but it was with the help of somebody else who I had this different title and they said, well, how about this? And so as far as the actual title of it, it came up from a discussion, but in terms of how I guess, am I that person or why am I that person? I can never, nobody can ever say, you know what, I'm the person that has to be the sort of the decider of this, or I'm the top person to teach you this. But what I will say is that I've spent the better part of the last 10 years interviewing high achievers, and we've reached around 4,000 at this point. So I like to think, at the very least, I've had a very exhaustive study into what these high achievers are doing differently than other people.
Right. So for those that are interested in speaking, how do you have some tips on how they can come up with that signature talk? Because I know a lot of times people think, oh, it's too confining. I can kind of just customize it to each audience. I don't want to be pigeonholed. But I mean, you lead with that, like right there on your LinkedIn profile. So have you found that to be constricting, or has that opened more doors because you're clear?
Great question. And I'll say that there's plenty of examples of both working quite well. You know, you don't have to look any further than speakers like, let's say, a Seth Godin, who's very much, when you bring Seth Godin in, what he's going to talk about, versus maybe Tony Robbins, who, is a little more generalized. I mean, Tony's on peak performance, success, what have you. So what I will say first, Wes, is there's no right or wrong, but I think there is a right or wrong to what feels right for you. And so for me, I started the opposite way. I started very broad based. I was teaching, and you and I had chatted about this. I was teaching sales first, and then I moved into customer service. And so I really kind of floated around doing different things and having multiple talks. And I still have more than just that talk. But ultimately, I decided I needed a signature talk for one key reason. And that's because, first of all, people didn't know, what do I hire Corey for? So going to your clarity question, that was a really big part of it. But the second thing was, I found that it's hard to stand out in a world where there's more speakers than you can count on many, many hands. So there's a lot of speakers. And so if you can come around to a signature talk or a niche that you focus on, then the benefit is people know I hire Corey for this. Right. But back to your, you asked the secondary question, how do I come up with that talk, whether it's signature or whether you come up with multiple talks? One of the things that I teach people is a thing called, I call it the spider method. And I actually learned it in the stand-up comedy world, not in the business world. But essentially, it's like mind mapping. And what I show people how to do is literally take a circle, which is kind of the body of your spider, and then you add the legs. And those legs, and this gets you thinking creatively. So the legs could be, let's say if you have the body is customer service, then the legs could be, you could have 3, for example, legs of customer service, and those become your 3 main points that you're trying to make. So one could be, how do I create a customer service system? Another one could be, what does bad customer service look like? And let's say a third one could be, how do I deliver the unexpected? And then what you do is then from there, you branch out and say, okay, what am I going to cover? What stories am I going to tell? What have you off of those legs? So that it's really more of a mind mapping thing, but I found it very effective for people to get crystallized about, okay, what's my main topic? And then what can I cover within that topic? And what I will add in is I really believe it's important if you're speaking for a limited amount of time that you decide how many points you want to have. That could be 3 or 5, let's say, as an example, if it's a keynote. But once you get beyond, even 3 is tough, but once you get beyond a certain number, people stop listening because they can't keep track or they can't put that many things into place. So that's kind of the strategy I give people, is that spider method I mentioned.
Yeah. And how do you know what to include and what to leave out? Because that was tough for me. I mean, I would always over-deliver, right? I didn't want people thinking I left anything out, or I teased them. They got to go to my website or buy whatever to get the full gist of it. But the reality is, people start checking out pretty soon. And you got to keep them engaged, not overwhelm them. But how do you throttle your own talk?
It's not easy, that's for sure. And to your point about people sort of checking out, and this is something I don't know why it always sticks with me on the speaking side, but Tom Ziglar, who's the son of the late Zig Ziglar, we had him in our speaking program just in an interview, one of the exclusive interviews, and he shared that his father, they found out from a psychologist that Zig used to every 7 minutes insert a joke or humor to keep you engaged, because he didn't know this. This was kind of unconscious, they said, but people checked out at the time after about 7 minutes because that's how long it was between commercials on TV. So he was doing this unconsciously, but today it's probably closer to 2 or 3 or 4 minutes. And so first part to that is to keep people engaged. You got to be mixing it up, whether it's adding humor, whether you start a new story, whether you keep your story short, engaging the audience. So for instance, maybe you ask a question. It doesn't have to be a question where they're going to yell out an answer, but you could say, has anybody in the audience ever experienced this? And then you'll find they tune in because now it's about them, the audience. So first of all, in terms of keeping people engaged, you certainly have to mix it up more than you would have before. The secondary part, I guess, the first thing you asked, I'll reverse and answer that. Second, in terms of weeding at your own talk, that one's really tough. And what I've done is I've sort of tested it. I've used the stage, used audiences, and I don't mean used in a manipulative way, but I've worked in front of audiences and then tested what really needs to be there and what I just think I should add in. And so I have evaluation forms that ask the audience to be very honest about things. So what did you like today? What did you wish you didn't cover? Like even the opposite of what you'd expect. And what I found is that allows me to get really honest with what is resonating with people and what isn't. And so if things are resonating regularly, then of course they stay in. But if things I think they're great, or I want to leave it in, but they're telling me, you know what, it didn't add any value for me at all, then whether I like it or not, it has to go. So I actually kind of put it back into the client's shoes without them sort of really knowing that's what I was doing on my evaluation form.
Right. So how long did it take to form this talk? Was this years in the making, going around to Chamber of Commerce functions and Rotary clubs until you finally fine-tuned it?
So interestingly, as a speaker in general, one of the things that was important to me, and I really believe this is a challenge a lot of speakers have, is getting paid to speak. And the reason I say that is because that's the biggest question I get asked. How do you get paid to speak? So when I started from day one, I was speaking for something. So I remember I did this gym talk and I traded them with 90-day gym memberships. And I traded people for testimonials. As long as you like my talk, here's what I'm hoping you can do. Or $300 when I was early on, $200. And so to answer the question, I guess, fully, I've been speaking for about 16 years as a paid speaker. And I did when I started the chamber circuit, the Rotary circuit, to fine-tune stuff. But by the time I started deciding this should be my signature talk, I had already done thousands of interviews. So I knew that I wanted to share this insight, and I knew people were blown away by some of the things I was sharing that I'd learned in interviews. And at the same time, I had been crafting talks for quite some time. So I had been testing my earlier talks in, like I say, with evaluation forums, in the Rotary circuit, in the chamber circuit, and then also with paid clients. And then it's kept evolving from there. So by the time I put this talk together, I already kind of had a feel for how to craft a talk, and then also the knowledge that I had taken from all these interviews. And then at the same time, I was able to go through what I was learning during these interviews, see what were the most common traits, and then that became an easy answer for what I worked into the talk. Because if something's coming up all the time that a high achiever is doing that most people are struggling with, that I feel needs to be put in the talk more than that oddity that only one person's doing. So they kind of crafted themselves. But like I say, thankfully, by the time I decided on a signature talk, I already had the experience crafting talks and testing them over the years.
Yeah, very cool. So now is it all inbound for you, or do you still do outbound, like mailers and whatnot, to HR people or associations or event planners to get booked?
So it's a mixture now. So I would say, if I put a number on it, it's probably 60 to 70% inbound, and then let's say, well, obviously the opposite, 30 or 40% outbound. But it's a different approach now than it used to be. So when I first started, I was that salesperson that literally said, I love this. This is my calling, I feel, but I have no clients. I was in an aggressive sales industry. So I had some clients that I had built up, and I got lucky and I booked something with a college teaching a sales program. So I got some clients there. But for the most part, it was picking up the phone, and back then picking up the phone and literally almost yellow pages, like almost to that level. And that evolved over the years, and the percentage of doing that got lower and lower, the amount of time I was doing that. But what changed really, and this was a game changer for me, Wes, is that my evaluation form that I started handing out when I was doing talks, I kept crafting it, and eventually I got around to the one I have today, which has like 6 questions on it. But it doesn't have this rate me 1 out of 10 stuff, because most people don't know what to rate you, or they'll go, I'll give him a 7. He was good, but I don't want to get his head inflated, or I'll give him it was okay, so I'll give him a 3. You don't know how to read that. And so I wanted it to be open-ended questions. And one of the biggest ones on there is just a simple question that says, do you know of others that could benefit from a similar talk to the one Corey delivered today? And what I will say is, from, let's call that an outbound. If we do outbound prospecting, that probably generates, out of the, like I say, 30 or 40%, that probably generates about 20% of those leads. So basically, people see me talk, they're on the spot. And of course, people will approach you afterward if they're interested. But what's really cool about that is it actually triggers, and I've discovered this over the years, it triggers in people who may otherwise not think, you know what, we could use him, or my Rotary could, or my large association event that I volunteer for. What I found is that when people approach you, it's usually because they're thinking about their company, but they forget all the other people they know that could hire you, or company they used to work for, that type of thing. And so it triggers a ton of leads just from that evaluation form. And then the rest of it is a mixture between, I have an assistant who does some emailing. It's very targeted though, some emailing, and then beyond that, a little bit of social media. But like you said, most of it is inbound, and then that, believe it or not, that evaluation form is probably 20 to 30% of the whole thing.
So they'll say what? like they know the president of a company, or they know an event, the event coordinator, and they get you in touch? I mean, do they provide the actual name, or do you just follow up with them and say, hey, can you give me an introduction?
Yeah, so great question. So how it's worded, it says, do you know of somebody else who could benefit, or someone, because I don't want them not think about themselves and their company. So if it's their company, obviously that answers that. I mean, they'll basically say, reach out to me. We're looking for somebody for this or that. Or if they're on a committee, same idea. So the answer is still pretty much, I'll ask, can I follow up with you, or can we follow up with you can we follow up with you afterwards? And then we have a little place for their contact info. So the answer is almost always following up with them, because even if they're going to be the intermediary and maybe refer me or connect me with the person, I still want it to be something that they don't forget about, 2 weeks later or whenever we reach them. So we kind of leave it with them. They say, yeah, reach out, I'll connect you, or reach out and we're looking for somebody. But the answer is what it usually looks like after that. We'll reach out, and 95% of the time when you reach out, which is not, hopefully you don't leave it too long, as you know, in the sales side, 2 weeks later, they could say, in their head, I changed my mind. So we don't leave it too long. But when we reach out, usually we'll say, hey, you mentioned so-and-so. Sometimes they'll mention the name, sometimes they won't. But you mentioned somebody that could benefit. Wanted to see if we can maybe connect and chat a bit further, or if you may know who I should reach out to, if they mention the company name, and did you want to connect me, or what works best? So I kind of leave it to them to tell me what works best. But the key thing is having them not leave that day without thinking of it and putting that on the sheet, so that I know to follow up. If you don't know a lead exists, of course, you can't do anything with it. So the key thing is to be able to make it easy for them, but leave with some leads that now, okay, I can follow back up on this and actually cite, you mentioned this in the evaluation form. So it's quite warm at that point, but it still involves another step or two before it gets right to that stage of, is this a hot lead, if you will? Because, some of the people will say, I worked at the Gap and I think they could use this, and I know this HR manager. But that doesn't mean that when you reach out to the Gap, they have a budget, or they're actually looking to make changes, or that they don't do it all internally. So there's still usually an extra step. The best case scenario is if it's for their company, if they're the CEO of the company and they're looking, or if they're with an association and they make the decision. That's probably about 30 or 40% of the time. That's obviously a pretty hot lead, because they're telling you, I need somebody. But like I said, those ones that it isn't that way, it involves maybe another couple of steps. And then out of that, probably a little more than half of those turn into active, usually booked deals. But like I said, there's still certainly some that end up being just, they threw it on the sheet and it turns out to be nothing.
Right. Very interesting. So are you one of those divas that did you require like green M&Ms and stuff?
No, I don't. I have a very informal speaking agreement that we put together, meaning either the client, if they have one, then we go with theirs, or we go with mine. Very informal. It's a 1-page, and it really outlines more what we've agreed to price-wise, how that'll be paid, i.e. the deposit and then the remaining balance. We agreed to who will provide what, but it's all cut and dry. And no, there's no added in there like M&Ms or 2 first-class seats, 1 for my baby who comes with me on my trips. Like there's none of that stuff.
You mean you don't take your support peacock on the plane?
No, when I said the baby, I have a little over a 6-month-old baby, and it'd be great to bring him on to every talk, but no, I don't make that a requirement. The cool part is he's under 2, so he flies free anyway. There
you go. Yeah, my wife's not a big traveler, so if I'm speaking in Vegas or Phoenix, she'll come with me, but otherwise, she's not traveling.
I get that totally.
Plus, it's hard with 7 kids. But yeah, did you see that story this week? Somebody has a support peacock, and I think it was United, said, yeah, you're not taking that bird on the plane.
No, so when you said that, I didn't know where that was coming from. No,
it literally just happened.
I was like, support the peacock, what does that even mean? But I didn't press further because I thought maybe it's, I thought exactly it was maybe what it was. It's just something I'm out of the loop on.
Oh, man. I think it was Delta like a month or 2 ago. So they're cracking down on service animals, and United doing the same thing. Because it's crazy. I see people all the time because I travel, but I see them just in restaurants and around, like they literally, they bought a patch that says service animal, on eBay, and they put it on their dog so they can take them everywhere. And it's like, yeah, that's not really a service animal, but oh well. I digress.
Well, but yeah, so no support peacock comes with me.
So when you speak, do you have your outline? You just know what to cover? Do you use slides? Does it depend?
So it depends. So I'm going to say the straight and easy answer is that I usually use slides, but and I say this straight easy answer because sometimes you have clients that say they don't like PowerPoint because they've seen speakers that have come and basically the PowerPoint is the presentation and not them. So it's a great question for that reason.
Oh, are you saying I've been doing it wrong? Is that what you're saying?
I haven't seen your PowerPoint, so I won't But really what it comes down to is the PowerPoint filled with, and I'm not saying yours in general, I'm saying in general, is it filled with 55 bullet points each slide? Yeah. And that, clients this day and age don't want that. I mean, and I'm generalizing, but that's been the overriding theme. So I use PowerPoint for the most part, but I use it loosely in the sense that it's mostly images on a screen. So it's a picture. And so to answer your question about how I present and do I have notes in that, the image on the screen to me is my note. So maybe it's because I spent years in the stand-up comedy club trenches, but I really can remember a story, the full story based on a picture. So mine is just the image that they can then associate with the story. And that's really, each slide is basically just an image. There's very little in the way of text. And so when there is text, it becomes that much more powerful because you won't find much text. And if I'm being full disclosure and full transparency, I lifted that, in the business world we'll say I tried to take what he was doing and work and build on it. But Steve Jobs is where I got that. I lifted that from Steve Jobs' presentations. I kind of read all these different studies about who was the best presenter. Steve Jobs kept coming up over and over again. So I went on YouTube and I started watching Steve Jobs' presentations and said, what is he doing that I'm not doing? And one of the biggest ones, because I was still bullet point heavy then, was that he had just visuals on screens. And I'm like, why am I not doing that? I'm a storyteller. I have a stand-up comedy background where I had to memorize the stuff for years. And so why am I not doing this? And so if I'm being full disclosure, I got that from Steve Jobs. And then a guy named Carmine Gallo just put out a book, The Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs. And lo and behold, I was reading through it, and there's a whole chapter, I think, dedicated to using visuals on your slides rather than bullet points. So I guess that's the answer. I use the slides and the visuals as my sort of memory trigger. But other than that, it's there's not a lot more than me on the stage.
Well, I mean, look, dude, I use one slide, okay? I put all my notes about a font 4, and we just go through it, okay? But, I don't know, man. I'm pretty dang good. So maybe after this, I'll teach you a few things, all right?
Yeah, it's to each their own, right? I mean,
and I use a lot of formulas. Got to have formulas, man.
Yeah, well, those are big, and charts are like a lot of charts, not just one. And I'll add in Seth Godin. This is again full disclosure. I mentioned him earlier, but he goes out there with like 55 slides, but he pounds through them. But there's no. They're all images. But there's an example of somebody who puts way more slides than most people would recommend that you do. But it actually became part of his brand, and it works for him. But that doesn't mean it's going to work for the next person who doesn't have the experience he does using those slides.
Yeah. And I tend to use more. I learned from Jeffrey Gitomer. I remember I saw him years ago in Anaheim, and he says never use smaller than font 48, and he says slides are free. Add another one. And I'm a fan
of Jeffrey's work, but I hadn't heard that before. I love that.
Yeah, and so I use a lot of slides, but I may cover 5 or 6 or 7 slides in a minute. It's just making a point and trying to drive it home.
Well, and I think the other thing too, Wes, out of that is to give a fair answer to anybody that's using PowerPoint and saying, how should I use it? The truth is it has to be authentic to you, and it has to, I think, it has to match your presentation style. So I'm a storyteller. I'm a walk the stage speaker. So for me, it didn't make sense to have all these bullet points that I was then turning to read. It didn't flow with me. But there could be somebody who's a great speaker, and they're working with accounting, and that's what they're presenting on, and they're actually presenting numbers only all the time. Who am I to say they shouldn't have charts all through it and text and bullets and all that stuff, right? So, I mean, I really think it has to feel right for you, but you, I think, deep down know, is it working for you? And if not, those evaluation forms I mentioned, get some open-ended ones, ask that question. What did you like about my slides? What didn't you? And if over and over again people are saying, this isn't working, then I think that's when you need to look and see, is there a change in order?
Yeah. So that brings up another point. I mean, if it's a really big auditorium, will you still walk it, or will you, at some point, is it like, man, I better just stay up on stage?
It's a great question. It's depending on the size. For the most part, I'll end up staying up on the stage if it's a really large venue. But I'll say it this way too: I'm one of those people that it wouldn't stop me from walking it. It has to be the right reason. In other words, I wouldn't just jump down and walk it just for the sort of the shock value or the cheap pop, if you will. But if there's a reason for me to walk it, or if the talk I was delivering, if the client asked me to customize it and, we talked about it and they wanted me to engage with the audience, maybe we're doing a breakout session, for 15 minutes at the end of a keynote. So it depends on the reason. I will walk it if necessary, but I won't add it in just for the sake of adding it in.
Yeah. Very cool. All right, man. So you have 3 questions. I have 1. All right.
Okay.
1. So, imagine our listeners, they're on a plane, they're on a train, they're jogging, they're riding a bike, they're driving a car. They can't take notes. They can't do something right this second. But as a result of listening to this, what should they do at the earliest moment possible to grow their business and particularly grow their speaking business?
Wow. First thing they should do, I would say, because there's the answer of studying other speakers and if you want to learn the craft, I mentioned watching videos of other speakers and things like that. But I would say if they want to, this is not meant to be a cop-out answer, but if they want to really dive in, let's say, to speaking and learn the business, outside of, we have a speaking program, so I'm not trying to pitch that, but outside of something like that, like going through a program with somebody, I would say there's like a small amount of books that are dedicated to the speaking industry that could change your life and jumpstart you, that in the speaking business, that I wish I would have read when I was younger and when I started in speaking. It would have saved so many years. So top of mind, a few of those books. One is Speak and Grow Rich. And people can find that by Googling it, I'm sure. There's also Money Talks by Alan Weiss. And then the other one I have right in front of me here is Book Yourself Solid by Michael Port. And by the way, you can go on and Google Michael Port, and he's got a ton of great stuff that you can learn from. Another one, actually, I would say is the one I mentioned, The Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs. If that one will take you through exactly how that masterful presenter put together everything. So I would say if somebody's saying, what's the one thing I should do? It's not meant to be a cop-out to say add more learning, but you talked when we were chatting earlier about the importance of learning and investing in yourself. I would say grab one of those books and dive in, because they'll teach you more about the speaking business in that sitting, whatever that turns out to, however many hours that is, than you'll be able to learn any other way in that amount of time. So that, I would say, invest in learning, grab one of those books, or dive on and to a course in teaching you the speaking world. And I'm not trying to add, an extra month onto their time of learning the process, but I really think if you measure twice and cut once, as they say, it'll be a lot more effective for you, because you'll grow quicker once you finally jump in head first.
All right, now that we practiced that, I'm going to go ahead and cut that out. Okay, you're supposed to say, buy everything that Wes does. Okay, so go ahead and I'll send that to you in a note and just read that, okay?
Okay.
All right.
I can say it now, too. Buy everything. Just so you get the soundbite.
Yeah, baby. All right, man. So where do people go to find out more about you?
You know what, Wes? Probably the best place I could send people right now, I'll give 2 places if that's okay. One is we just released the new book. It literally just came out on February 20th. And that's through the magic of sound bites, because, when we're recording this, it's a bit before that. But when it's airing, it's probably maybe just after it. I'm not sure. So either way, February 20th, 2018, we're dropping the Book of Why and How. We launched it on a Kickstarter, had some success, and then now it's going full force on Amazon. So I guess that's one place I would send people, because that tells you a lot about me, the book, how I wrote it, why I wrote it, what's in it, tells you a lot about me. So that book people can grab at thebookofwhy.com. Again, thebookofwhy.com. And that'll actually end up forwarding them to the Amazon page for the book. And then the secondary option is That Speaker Guy, and that's all spelled out, thatspeakerguy.com.
And you had to do that because people can't spell your name, huh?
You know, there's some truth to that. I actually have CoreyPoirier.com as well, but that SpeakerGuy.com is the mainstay.
Yeah, I know. I've struggled with the Sales Whisperer. I've got other URLs because people leave out THE. People have put V, like the letter, like Victor, V Sales Whisperer. I was like, what in the world is V Sales? Like, did you seriously? Or they'll leave out ER. You know, oh my gosh. That's why I have a bunch of shorter URLs as well. All right. So give me that again. ThatSpeakerGuy.com?
Yeah, ThatSpeakerGuy.com. And I will say too, Wes, that one of the cool things is, like all of us, I guess, in the world that we're in, you know, in the online world, at that website, if people want, right near the top, they can sign up and they can actually get, there's a freebie there. It changes from time to time. So I'll say a free gift there. They can sign up. But I always say, you know what? Sign up if you want the free gift and stay in our tribe if you want to. But if you don't want to, sign back out 2 seconds later and at least you get the free gift. So I'm not trying to keep
all right. So this brings up another question. I just pulled that up. So how do you keep these two sites going? Because they're a little bit different, right? Poirier versus That Speaker Guy.
So here's I guess the non-sexy answer. We just finished redoing That Speaker Guy, and so CoreyPoirier.com is going to be actually forwarding over very soon.
Oh, gotcha.
So keeping the two going only for the short term, because just like you said, it's not that easy to keep them both going.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the benefit, you know, cross-promoting, whatever, but when it's the same thing, it's like, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, we're making that switch soon. It's just been a matter of the CoreyPoirier.com had a lot of other stuff on it that we're just basically going through and making sure we don't lose anything that you back up most things, but just going through to make sure we haven't missed any T's or I's.
Oh, yeah, I get you. Very nice. Well, Corey, thanks for coming on the Sales Podcast, man. Stay warm up there in Canada, and I look forward to your book coming out.
Awesome stuff. Thanks so much, Wes. It's been a pleasure.
All right, man. Have a great day. If you want to expand and enhance your reach, if you want to create inbound opportunities, if you want to raise your prices, you need to be speaking. It's just that simple. When you are on stage, you are seen as the expert. When you are seen as the expert, you are negotiating from a position of strength. People are coming to you. When they come to you, you can set the stage. You can set the tone. You can set the price. So do what you need to do. People always, we overestimate what we can achieve in a year, but we underestimate what we can achieve in 5 or even 3, which means you got to get started. Get going. You got to pay your dues. You got to perfect the pitch. You got to perfect your presentation. You got to get your stories right, the flow. So get started. It will take some time, but it's worth it. All right. So if you need some help, check out the resources that Corey mentioned. Check out the resources I mentioned at the beginning of the show. Hit my the private consulting page that I just enhanced. Join the Make Every Sale course because I get into more than just selling in that course. But like I said, we're going to be getting into the new Inner Circle, which really the name is changing just so people understand it's not just a pure sales training group. We get into podcasting. We get into speaking. We get into writing a book. We get into blogging and SEO and everything around building a business. Okay. So surround yourself with good people and take massive action. Can you do that for me? I guarantee it'll be worth it. Pull the trigger and ride the bullet. And I'm here to help you succeed, help you step out of your comfort zone, help you overcome whatever's been holding you back so you can grow your sales. As always, thanks for listening. Please share this. Give me some comments. And now, go sell something.